The night is quiet. There is a soft stillness in the air, like a room that has already settled into sleep. Outside, the world feels distant, almost like a memory fading into darkness. And in that quiet, we begin to drift gently backward in time, to another century, another rhythm of life. A slower one. A quieter one. A world where childhood did not stretch out in long, playful years, but instead folded in on itself, becoming something small, careful, and often very quiet. We find ourselves in Victorian England. The light here is softer, filtered through narrow streets and tall brick buildings. Smoke hangs gently in the sky, drifting from chimneys that never quite rest. The mornings begin early, often before the sun has fully made its way above the rooftops. And even at dawn, there is already a sense of duty in the air. In this world, children wake not to toys or laughter, but to expectation. Not loud expectation. Not harsh, in the way we might imagine. But something quieter. Something constant. A feeling that life is already decided. That there is a place to stand, and a way to behave, and very little space in between. In a small house, tucked into a narrow street, a child opens their eyes. The room is simple. A small bed. Thin blankets. A window that lets in only a little light. The air is cool, and it carries the faint smell of coal smoke drifting in from outside. There is no rush, but there is no lingering either. The child rises. Slowly. Carefully. As if already aware that time is not something to be wasted. There are no bright colors here. Clothing is plain. Worn. Repaired many times over. Each piece serves a purpose, and nothing more. The floor creaks softly under small footsteps. Somewhere in the house, an adult is already awake. Moving quietly. Preparing for the day. There is no need to call out. No need to remind the child what must be done. It is already understood. This is one of the quiet lessons of Victorian childhood. Understanding without being told. The kitchen, if it can be called that, is modest. A small table. A few utensils. Perhaps a loaf of bread, already cut into careful portions. Nothing wasted. Nothing extra. The child eats slowly. Not because there is time, but because there is a habit of carefulness. Every bite matters. Every crumb is noticed. Outside, the street is beginning to stir. Footsteps. Distant voices. The rolling of cartwheels over uneven ground. The city is waking, but it does not wake gently. It moves with purpose, even in its earliest moments. And the child, still small, still quiet, is already part of that movement. There is no long pause before the day begins. No wide space for imagination to stretch and wander. Instead, there is a steady, almost invisible pressure, guiding everything. How to sit. How to speak. How to be still. These lessons are not always spoken aloud. Often, they are simply shown, again and again, until they become part of the body itself. A glance from an adult can be enough. A slight shake of the head. A silence that lingers just a little too long. And from these small signals, the child learns. Learns to lower their voice. Learns to fold their hands. Learns to expect very little, and to ask for even less. The house itself seems to echo these lessons. The walls are plain. The furniture is sturdy, but not comfortable. Everything has a kind of quiet restraint, as though even objects understand their place. Nothing draws attention to itself. Nothing invites excess. Even warmth is measured. The fire, when it burns, does so carefully. Fuel is precious. Heat is not something to be taken for granted. And so the child learns to live with a certain coolness, both in the air and in the way life is felt. Outside, the sky is often gray. Not always, but often enough that it becomes part of the memory of this time. A soft, endless gray that settles over streets and rooftops, making everything feel a little quieter, a little more contained. And in that quiet, childhood becomes something different. It is not a time set apart. It is not protected in the way we might imagine. Instead, it blends slowly into adulthood, almost without a clear line between the two. A child may be very young, but already they carry themselves with a certain seriousness. Not because they are told to be serious, but because the world around them leaves little room for anything else. Even play, when it happens, is quiet. Simple. A small object. A short moment. A game that does not take up too much space or too much time. And even then, there is always an awareness that it cannot last. That soon, there will be something else to do. Something expected. Something necessary. In many homes, children take on small responsibilities almost as soon as they are able. Carrying water. Cleaning small spaces. Watching younger siblings. Tasks that are not heavy on their own, but together create a rhythm, a steady pattern that fills the day. There is comfort in this rhythm, in a way. It is predictable. It does not change quickly. But it also leaves very little room for dreaming. Very little space for wanting more than what is already there. And so, slowly, gently, almost without noticing, the child begins to understand something important. Something that will shape the rest of their life. That expectations are not high. That hopes are kept small. That life is something to be managed, not expanded. This is not always spoken. It is not written down or explained. It is simply lived. Day after day. Morning after morning. In the quiet rooms, in the narrow streets, in the soft gray light of a world that moves steadily forward without asking too many questions. And as the day continues, the child steps outside. The air feels different here. Cooler. Heavier. Filled with the sounds of a city that never quite rests. Footsteps pass by without pause. Adults move quickly, their faces set in quiet focus. There is little conversation. Little lingering. Everyone seems to know where they are going. And the child follows the same pattern. Walking carefully. Staying close. Taking up as little space as possible. Even in the open street, there is a sense of containment. Of boundaries that are not drawn, but still very clearly felt. A look can remind them. A tone of voice can guide them back into place. And so they move through the world with a kind of quiet awareness. Always adjusting. Always careful. Always learning what is expected, and what is not. The buildings rise on either side, tall and close together. Windows look down like watchful eyes. Curtains shift slightly, hinting at lives unfolding behind them. Everything feels observed. Not in a frightening way, but in a steady, constant way that encourages order, quietness, and control. And in this environment, childhood continues to shape itself, slowly, carefully, into something small and contained. Something that does not reach too far. Something that does not ask for too much. Something that understands, very early on, that life will not offer endless choices. Only a few. and those must be accepted. As the morning stretches on, the sounds of work begin to grow. Doors open. Voices rise just slightly. Tools begin their steady rhythm. And somewhere in that growing noise, the child finds their place again. Not at the center. Not even at the edge. But somewhere in between. Quiet. Careful. And already learning how to expect very little, and to carry that expectation gently, like something fragile, through the rest of the day. The light shifts slowly. The hours pass without urgency, yet never truly slowing down. And as the world continues its quiet, steady movement, the shape of this childhood becomes clearer, softer at the edges, but firm at its core. A childhood not built on dreams, but on understanding, on restraint, on the quiet acceptance of what is, and what will likely always be. And in that acceptance, something settles. Something calm. Something still. As if the world itself is whispering, over and over again, in the softest possible voice. This is enough. And nothing more is needed. The morning continues without hurry. The light grows a little stronger, though it never feels bright. It moves gently across the narrow street, touching the edges of windows, slipping quietly through thin curtains, resting softly on worn wooden floors. Inside the small house, the air carries a faint warmth now. Not a full warmth, but just enough to take the sharp edge off the early chill. The fire has been tended with care, each piece of coal placed thoughtfully, never wasted. The child moves through this space with quiet familiarity. There is no need to look around to understand where things are. Every object has its place, and every place has been learned over time. The table, the chair, the small shelf with its few belongings, all of it feels settled, like it has always been this way and will remain so. There is comfort in that sameness. But it is a quiet comfort. One that does not invite excitement, only calm acceptance. Outside, the rhythm of the street grows steadier. A cart passes slowly, its wheels rolling over uneven stones with a soft, repeating sound. A door closes somewhere down the road. Footsteps echo briefly, then fade again into the background. Nothing calls for attention. Nothing demands to be noticed. And so the child continues to move quietly, becoming part of that same gentle rhythm. There are small tasks to be done. A cloth is lifted and used to wipe the table, not quickly, but carefully, as if the act itself holds meaning. Each motion is slow, deliberate. Not because time is abundant, but because carefulness has become a habit. The hands of a child learn early how to move with purpose. Not playfully, but steadily. There is no rush, but there is also no wandering. Every action is connected to something that needs to be done. And in this way, the day begins to shape itself. In many Victorian homes, even the smallest children are given responsibilities. Not as a burden, but as a quiet expectation. A natural part of life. No one announces it. No one explains it in long words. It simply becomes clear, over time, that everyone has a role. Even the very young. And so the child learns to notice what needs doing. A cup left on the table. A chair slightly out of place. A small spill on the floor. Each one is an opportunity to act without being asked. And this, too, becomes a lesson. To see without being told. To respond without waiting. To exist in a way that does not disturb, but quietly supports the world around them. The house remains calm. Voices, when they are heard, are soft. Measured. There is no loud laughter filling the rooms, no sudden bursts of sound. Even conversation seems to follow a certain rhythm, gentle and controlled. The child listens more than they speak. And in listening, they begin to understand the unspoken rules that guide everything. When to move. When to sit. When to remain still. These rules are not written down, but they are clear. And they are consistent. That consistency becomes a kind of quiet guide, shaping behavior without force. As the morning moves forward, the child may step outside again. The air has shifted slightly. There is a faint smell of damp earth mixed with coal smoke. It lingers in the streets, wrapping itself around buildings, softening the edges of everything. The sky remains pale. Clouds stretch across it in long, slow formations, as if even the sky itself is in no hurry. Other children can be seen now. But they do not gather in loud groups. They do not run freely through the streets without care. Instead, they move in much the same way as the child we follow. Close to their homes. Close to their tasks. Their movements are small, contained. Even their voices, when they speak, remain low. There is a shared understanding among them. An awareness that the world they live in does not allow for too much noise, too much freedom, too much expansion. And so they adapt. Naturally. Quietly. Without question. A small game might begin. Something simple. A stone passed from hand to hand. A short moment of balance on a curb. But even in play, there is restraint. No one shouts. No one draws attention. The game exists briefly, then fades, as if it was never meant to last long. And perhaps, in a way, it was not. Because soon, there are other things to return to. A call from a doorway. A glance from an adult. A reminder, not in words, but in presence. And the child responds. Without resistance. Without complaint. This is another quiet lesson. That personal desire does not take priority. That what must be done comes first. Always. And so the child steps back into the rhythm of the day. The hours pass in this steady, gentle way. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sudden. Just a continuous flow of small actions, small observations, small understandings. Inside the home, the light shifts again. It moves across the walls, touching surfaces that have been worn smooth by years of use. Everything carries a sense of history, but not in a grand way. In a quiet way. A chair that has held many people. A table that has seen countless meals. A floor that has felt the steps of generations. And now, the child becomes part of that quiet history. Another presence moving through the same space, learning the same patterns, absorbing the same expectations. There is something almost gentle about it. Not soft, exactly. But steady. Reliable. Predictable. And in that predictability, the child begins to feel a kind of calm. Not the calm of freedom, but the calm of knowing what comes next. Knowing what is required. Knowing where they fit. This sense of place becomes very important. Because in a world where opportunities are limited, where choices are few, understanding one's place provides a kind of quiet stability. It removes uncertainty. It replaces questions with routine. And routine, in this time, is a form of comfort. Even if it is a quiet, restrained kind of comfort. As midday approaches, the sounds of the street change again. There is a brief moment of pause. Not complete silence, but a soft slowing. People step inside for a short rest. A small meal. A moment to sit. The child does the same. The meal is simple. Bread. Perhaps a small portion of something warm. Nothing elaborate. Nothing excessive. But it is enough. And enough becomes an important idea. One that repeats again and again throughout Victorian childhood. Not abundance. Not variety. Just enough. Enough to continue. Enough to move forward. Enough to meet the expectations of the day. The child eats slowly. There is no rushing, but also no lingering. Each action remains balanced between those two quiet boundaries. Afterward, there may be a moment of stillness. A brief pause where nothing is required. But even this stillness has a certain shape. It is not filled with imagination or wandering thought. It is simply a pause. A small space between responsibilities. And soon, that space closes. The afternoon begins. Light softens again. Shadows grow longer, stretching gently across floors and streets. The world continues its steady rhythm, unchanged, unbroken. And the child continues within it. Learning, always learning, without formal instruction. Absorbing, always absorbing, without being aware of it. The lessons are not written in books. They are written in daily life. In repetition. In quiet observation. In the subtle guidance of a world that does not need to explain itself. And slowly, very slowly, something settles deeper inside the child. A quiet understanding. That life is not about seeking more, but about accepting what is given. That expectations should remain small. That hopes should be gentle. That desires should be kept close, and often unspoken. This understanding does not arrive all at once. It forms over time. Layer by layer. Day by day. Until it becomes something steady. Something natural. Something that feels, in its own quiet way, like the only way life has ever been. And as the afternoon drifts forward, the sounds soften again. The light dims slightly. And the world continues, calm and unhurried, carrying the child gently along with it, deeper into a life shaped not by possibility, but by quiet acceptance. The afternoon settles in slowly. There is no clear moment when it begins. It simply arrives, like a soft shadow stretching across the day. The light grows warmer for a short while, then begins its quiet fade, touching the edges of buildings and slipping gently along the narrow street. Inside the home, the air feels still again. The small sounds of the morning have softened. The careful movements, the quiet tasks, the low voices, all continue, but at an even slower pace now, as if the day itself is growing tired. The child feels this change, even if they do not think about it. There is a rhythm to everything here, and by now, that rhythm has become familiar. It moves through the body without effort. It guides each step, each motion, each pause. There is always something to do. Not large things. Not difficult things. But small, steady tasks that fill the time. A small pile of clothes to fold. A corner to sweep. A simple object to carry from one place to another. These actions are repeated often. So often that they begin to feel almost invisible. The hands know what to do before the mind needs to think. And in that repetition, something quiet takes shape. A kind of patience. A kind of stillness. The child does not rush. There is no reason to. There is no reward for finishing quickly, no praise for doing more than expected. The goal is not speed. The goal is quiet completion. To do what is needed, and then return to stillness. Outside, the street carries on. The sounds are softer now than in the morning. Less hurried. More spread out. A door opens, then closes. Footsteps pass by, slower than before. A distant voice rises briefly, then fades into the air. Even the city, it seems, has moments of quiet. And within that quiet, the child continues to move carefully through the day. There may be a moment when they pause by the window. Just for a second. Not long enough to be noticed. They look out at the street, at the narrow stretch of sky above, at the slow movement of people going about their lives. There is no longing in this moment. Not exactly. Just a quiet observation. A noticing. The world is there, moving steadily, and the child is here, moving just as steadily in their own small space. The two feel connected, but also distant. And then the moment passes. The child turns away. There is always something waiting. Something small, something necessary. And so the rhythm continues. In many Victorian households, the idea of discipline is not loud or forceful. It is quiet, constant, and deeply woven into everyday life. It is in the way objects are handled. In the way voices are kept low. In the way movements are controlled and measured. The child learns this without being told directly. They learn by watching. By noticing. By feeling the difference between what is acceptable and what is not. A sudden movement feels out of place. A raised voice feels too sharp. Even a moment of carelessness can feel like a disturbance in the calm surface of the day. And so the child adjusts. Again and again. Until carefulness becomes natural. Until quietness becomes comfortable. Until expectation itself becomes something soft, but ever present. The light shifts once more. The afternoon begins its slow descent toward evening. Shadows grow longer, stretching across the floor, climbing gently up the walls. The colors in the room grow softer, more muted, as if everything is being wrapped in a thin layer of dusk. There is a certain peace in this part of the day. Not a joyful peace, but a steady one. A familiar one. The child may feel a slight slowing in their body now. A quiet tiredness, not from strain, but from the steady repetition of small actions. The mind does not wander far. It stays close. Close to the present moment. Close to what needs to be done next. There is comfort in this closeness. In not having to think too far ahead. In not having to imagine too much. Because imagining more might lead to wanting more. And wanting more is not something this world encourages. Instead, there is a gentle returning, again and again, to what is already here. The small room. The quiet tasks. The steady rhythm of the day. Outside, the sky begins to change. The gray softens into something deeper. Hints of pale gold appear briefly, then fade. The air cools again. The smell of smoke becomes a little stronger as fires are prepared for the evening. The street grows quieter. People return indoors. Doors close. Windows dim. And slowly, the outside world begins to withdraw. Inside, the same process unfolds. The house prepares for night in its own quiet way. There are no grand routines. No elaborate rituals. Just a series of small, familiar actions. A table cleared. A floor brushed lightly. A chair set back into place. Each one done with the same care as before. Each one part of the same steady rhythm. The child takes part in this without hesitation. Without question. By now, these actions feel natural. Expected. almost necessary to maintain the calm balance of the home. And in doing them, the child feels a quiet sense of completion. Not pride. Not satisfaction in a loud or visible way. But a gentle feeling that things are as they should be. That the day is moving toward its end in the right way. The light fades further. The room grows dim. The outlines of objects soften. The sounds grow fewer, spaced further apart. A kind of stillness settles over everything. And within that stillness, the child begins to slow. Movements become smaller, quieter. The body prepares, almost without awareness, for rest. But even this rest is shaped by the same quiet expectations. There is no indulgence. No long drifting into sleep. Instead, there is a simple transition. From movement to stillness. From day to night. The bed is prepared. The thin blanket is smoothed. The space is small, but familiar. Safe in its own quiet way. The child lies down. The room is cool. The air is still. There are faint sounds from outside, distant footsteps, the soft closing of a door, the quiet hum of a city settling into night. And in this moment, as the day comes to a close, something remains. A feeling that has been present all along. Soft. Steady. Almost invisible. The understanding that life moves within certain boundaries. That expectations are gentle, but firm. That there is not much beyond what has already been seen. And within that understanding, there is a kind of calm. A quiet acceptance that does not resist. That does not question. That simply exists. The child closes their eyes. The day fades. And the same quiet rhythm that carried them through the morning, through the afternoon, now carries them softly into sleep. A sleep that is not filled with dreams of something larger, but with a gentle stillness. A continuation of the same calm, steady world. And as the night deepens, everything becomes softer, quieter, slower, until even the smallest sounds fade away. And the world, for a little while, rests. The night passes quietly. There are no sudden changes, no sharp interruptions. The darkness simply holds everything in a gentle stillness. The small house rests as it always does, its walls keeping in what little warmth remains, its rooms settled into silence. Outside, the street is softer than before. The usual sounds have faded. No carts, no steady footsteps, no low conversations drifting through the air. Only the occasional distant movement, a faint echo, a door closing far away, a quiet shift in the night. Inside, the child sleeps. Not deeply in the way of endless dreaming, but calmly. Still. As if the rhythm of the day continues even in rest. The same quiet order, the same gentle boundaries, carrying through the hours of darkness. Time moves forward without being noticed. And slowly, very slowly, the first signs of morning begin again. It does not arrive all at once. At first, there is only a slight change in the air. A softness. A lightening that is almost impossible to see. Then, little by little, the darkness begins to lift. The window holds a faint gray glow. The shapes in the room return, slowly taking form. The bed, the wall, the small table, all emerging gently from the night. The child stirs. There is no sudden waking. No stretching or lingering. Just a quiet return to awareness. Eyes opening softly. A breath taken. And then, without hesitation, the day begins again. It feels very much like the day before. And the day before that. This sameness is not unusual. It is expected, even comforting, in a quiet way. Because when each day follows the same pattern, there is no uncertainty. No need to wonder what will come next. Everything is already known. And so the child rises. The room is cool again. The air carries that familiar faint scent of coal and damp wood. It has settled into the fabric of the house, becoming part of its quiet identity. The floor creaks softly beneath small steps. The movements are careful, as always. Nothing rushed. Nothing wasted. Each action is part of a pattern that has been learned slowly, over time. And in this pattern, the child finds their place once more. The morning tasks begin again. Simple things. Small things. But important in their own quiet way. A cloth is lifted. A surface is wiped. A cup is moved. Each movement steady, deliberate, almost silent. There is no need for instruction. The body remembers. The hands know. And so the day unfolds without explanation. In Victorian childhood, much of life is shaped by repetition. Not the kind that feels heavy or burdensome, but the kind that becomes invisible. So familiar that it no longer stands out. It simply exists. Like the walls of the house. Like the rhythm of footsteps. Like the quiet turning of one day into the next. This repetition teaches something very gently. Something that settles deep, without force. That life will not change quickly. That circumstances will remain steady. That expecting something new, something different, something more, is not necessary. And so, the child learns not to expect it. This learning is not harsh. It is not given in strict words or firm commands. It is shaped slowly, through experience. Through the sameness of mornings. Through the quiet continuation of tasks. Through the steady rhythm that never quite breaks. Outside, the street begins to wake again. The sounds return, just as they always do. A cart in the distance. A door opening nearby. The soft murmur of voices beginning their day. Nothing surprising. Nothing out of place. The world continues exactly as it did before. And the child steps into it once more. The air feels the same. Cool. Slightly heavy. Filled with the faint smell of smoke that never fully disappears. Other figures move along the street, just as they did yesterday. Adults walking with purpose. Children staying close, moving carefully. Everything follows a quiet order. An order that does not need to be spoken. It is simply understood. The child walks with small, steady steps. There is no wandering. No sudden change in direction. Each movement is guided by a quiet awareness of where they should be, and where they should not. This awareness grows stronger over time. It becomes part of the way the child sees the world. Not in words, but in feeling. A sense of boundaries. Of limits. Of places where one belongs, and places where one does not. And within these boundaries, life continues. Small tasks return. Simple responsibilities. Nothing overwhelming. But always present. There is always something to be done. And so, there is always a reason to remain focused, quiet, and steady. The morning light grows a little stronger. But it never becomes bright or overwhelming. It stays soft. Filtered. Gentle against the surfaces it touches. The buildings stand close together, keeping the world contained. The sky remains a narrow strip above. And in this contained space, childhood continues to take shape. not as something wide and open, but as something careful, something defined, something shaped by what is allowed, and what is quietly discouraged. Even moments of stillness carry this shape. If the child pauses, it is only for a short while. A brief moment between actions. There is no long drifting into thought. No extended daydreaming. Because the rhythm does not allow for it. It gently pulls everything back into place. Again and again. The day moves forward. As it always does. Without urgency. Without delay. Just a steady, quiet progression from one moment to the next. Inside the home, the same patterns repeat. The same small movements. The same careful handling of objects. The same quiet presence of adults guiding the atmosphere without needing to speak much. The child continues to learn from this. Not through instruction, but through observation. Through feeling. Through being part of the same space, day after day. And in this learning, expectations remain small. They do not grow. They do not expand outward. Instead, they settle. They become contained, like the rooms of the house, like the narrow street outside. There is a quiet acceptance in this. A sense that life is not meant to be stretched or changed, but simply lived, within the shape it has been given. As the morning deepens, the sounds of work begin again. Soft at first. Then steady. A rhythm of tools. A movement of hands. A continuation of effort that feels both constant and calm. The child watches. Sometimes joins in small ways. Sometimes simply remains nearby, absorbing the pattern. There is no separation between childhood and the working world here. No clear boundary. Instead, there is a gradual blending. A slow transition that begins early and continues quietly. The child does not suddenly become responsible. They grow into it. Piece by piece. Day by day. Until it feels natural. Until it feels like it has always been this way. And through this process, something else forms. A quiet resilience. Not the kind that resists or pushes back, but the kind that accepts and continues. That moves forward without needing change. That finds calm within limitation. This resilience is gentle. Almost invisible. But it is strong in its own quiet way. It allows the child to move through each day without struggle. To accept each moment as it comes. To expect very little, and to be at peace with that expectation. The light shifts again. The morning begins to soften into midday. And once more, the world continues its steady rhythm. Unbroken. Unchanged. Calm. And the child, small and quiet within it, continues to learn, not through words, but through living. Through repeating. Through simply being part of a world that asks very little, and teaches, just as gently, to expect even less. Midday arrives without announcement. There is no clear line where morning ends. The light simply shifts, becoming a little fuller for a short while, resting softly on the narrow street and the worn surfaces inside the home. The child notices this change not with thought, but with feeling. A slight warmth in the air. A gentler glow through the window. A quiet sense that the day has reached its middle point. Inside, the house remains calm. The same careful order continues. Nothing has moved out of place. Nothing has changed in a noticeable way. And yet, the passage of time is there, soft and steady, like a slow breath moving through everything. The child pauses for a moment near the table. A small meal is prepared. Simple, as always. A piece of bread. Perhaps something warm, though not much. The portions are measured. Nothing extra. Nothing wasted. Each item placed with quiet intention. The child sits. There is no rush. No conversation filling the space. Just the gentle sound of eating, slow and careful. Each bite taken with the same quiet awareness that has shaped every part of the day. Food, like everything else, is not a source of excitement. It is a necessity. A small, steady part of life that supports what must be done. And in this, another lesson quietly settles. That comfort is not something to be sought in abundance, but something that exists in small, simple forms. Enough to continue. Enough to move forward. Nothing more. After the meal, the stillness returns briefly. A soft pause. The kind that feels like a quiet space between thoughts. But it does not last long. There is always a gentle pull back into motion. A reminder, not spoken, that the day continues. And so, the child rises again. There are more small tasks waiting. A cloth to rinse. A corner to tidy. A small object to return to its place. These actions repeat, just as they did before. Not exactly the same, but close enough that they feel familiar. Comforting in their sameness. Predictable in their pattern. And within this repetition, the child becomes even more settled into the rhythm. There is no questioning of why. No wondering about what else might exist beyond this. The world, as it appears here, feels complete. Contained. Defined. And so, expectations remain quiet and small. Outside, the street holds a soft kind of life. Not busy in a hurried way, but active enough to remind the child that the world continues beyond the walls of the house. A cart moves slowly past. Its wheels making that same steady sound against the stones. A figure walks by, head slightly lowered, moving with purpose. Another door opens, then closes again. These sounds drift in and out, never staying long. They do not interrupt. They simply exist, part of the background of the day. The child may step outside for a moment. The air feels a little warmer now, though still gentle. The sky, if it can be seen between the buildings, holds a pale color, softened by thin clouds. Other children are present again. Not gathered in loud groups. Not calling out to one another. Just there. Moving quietly, each within their own small space. There may be a brief exchange. A glance. A few soft words. But even these moments are restrained. There is an understanding, shared without explanation, that time is not meant to be spent freely. That there are always things waiting. Responsibilities that, though small, must be returned to. And so, even when children stand near one another, there is a kind of distance. A quiet separation. Not cold, not unfriendly. Just careful. As if each child carries within them the same gentle boundary. The same quiet expectation. The same understanding that life is not meant to expand too far beyond what is already known. The moment passes. The child turns back. There is no hesitation. No longing to remain outside. Because the rhythm calls them back, softly but clearly. And they follow. Inside, the air feels still again. The light has shifted slightly, beginning its slow movement toward afternoon. The house remains unchanged. Steady. Quiet. The same small world it has always been. And within it, the child continues to move, to act, to learn. The lessons deepen, though they are never spoken aloud. To be content with little. To expect only what is given. To find calm in repetition. To understand that life does not offer endless paths, but a single, steady one. This understanding becomes more natural with each passing hour. It does not feel heavy. It does not feel restrictive. It simply feels true. Like something that has always been known, even before it was fully understood. The afternoon begins to form. The light softens again. The shadows grow just slightly longer. The sounds outside begin their slow change. And inside, the same quiet rhythm continues. There is something almost gentle about it. Not soft in the way of comfort or indulgence, but gentle in its consistency. In its refusal to surprise or overwhelm. In its steady, unchanging presence. The child grows within this gentleness. Not outward. Not in wide, expressive ways. But inward. Becoming quieter. More careful. More aware of the small details that shape each moment. A folded cloth. A quiet step. A lowered voice. These become important. They define the day. They create a sense of order that feels necessary. And in that order, the child finds a quiet place. A place where expectations are clear, even if they are never spoken. A place where life moves steadily, without sudden shifts. A place where very little is asked, and even less is hoped for. The light continues to fade slowly. The warmth of midday slips away. The air cools once more. And the world begins its gentle movement toward evening. Nothing dramatic. Nothing abrupt. Just a soft, steady transition. The child feels it again. That subtle change. That quiet signal that the day is moving forward. And with it, the same calm understanding remains. That tomorrow will be much the same. That the rhythm will continue. That the small tasks, the quiet movements, the careful expectations, will all return again. And there is a kind of peace in that. A stillness that does not need to be questioned. A calm that does not need to be explained. Just a steady presence, carrying the child gently through the hours, and deeper into a life shaped by quiet acceptance. The afternoon deepens in a slow and quiet way. There is no sudden shift, no clear signal that time has moved forward. It simply happens, gently and without interruption. The light softens, losing the brief fullness it held at midday, and begins its steady drift toward evening once more. Inside the house, everything feels settled. The small movements continue, but they are softer now. Slower. As if even the tasks themselves are becoming quieter, matching the calm that fills the air. The child moves through this calm without effort. By now, the rhythm of the day feels natural, almost like breathing. There is no need to think about what comes next. The sequence of actions has already been learned, repeated so many times that it has become part of the body. A small object is lifted and placed down again. A surface is brushed lightly. A chair is adjusted just slightly, enough to return it to its proper place. These are not large moments. They do not stand out. But they carry a quiet importance. They keep the world in order. And in that order, everything remains steady. The child pauses briefly. Not out of distraction, but ushed lightly. A chair is adjusted just slightly, enough to return it to its proper place. These are not large moments. They do not stand out. But they carry a quiet importance. They keep the world in order. And in that order, everything remains steady. The child pauses briefly. Not out of distraction, but simply because there is a small space between tasks. A moment where nothing is required. The room is still. The air is cool. A faint sound drifts in from outside, perhaps the distant turning of a wheel, or the soft echo of footsteps passing by. The child listens, without really meaning to. Just a quiet awareness of the world beyond the walls. And then, as always, the moment passes. There is something else to do. There is always something else. This constant return to action, even in its smallest form, becomes another quiet lesson. That stillness is temporary. That movement, however gentle, is part of life. That time is not meant to be left empty. And so the child continues. In Victorian childhood, time is not divided into long stretches of freedom. It is filled, carefully and consistently, with small responsibilities. These responsibilities do not feel heavy on their own. But together, they shape the day. They create a pattern that leaves little room for anything beyond what is necessary. And over time, this pattern becomes familiar. Comforting, even. Because it removes uncertainty. It replaces the unknown with the known. The expected with the certain. And in that certainty, there is a kind of quiet calm. Outside, the street begins to change once more. The sounds that filled the earlier hours grow softer. More spaced out. Less frequent. The movement slows. People begin to return to their homes. Doors open and close with a gentle finality. Windows dim slightly as the light outside fades. The child may notice these changes, not in a conscious way, but as part of the overall feeling of the day. A slowing. A settling. A quiet drawing inward. The sky, what little of it can be seen, takes on a deeper tone. The pale light fades into something softer, more muted. Clouds stretch across it like thin layers, catching the last hints of brightness before letting them go. The air cools again. The faint smell of smoke returns, a little stronger now as fires are prepared for the evening. It drifts through the streets, into the small spaces between buildings, into the open edges of windows. And inside the home, the same preparation begins. Not in a hurried way. Not with urgency. Just a quiet series of actions that signal the end of the day is approaching. The table is cleared. Carefully. Every item lifted, moved, and set aside with intention. The floor is brushed lightly. Not to make it perfect, but to keep it in order. Everything returns to its place. Everything settles. The child takes part in this as naturally as anything else. There is no need to be asked. No need to be reminded. The body already knows. And in this knowing, the child becomes more deeply connected to the rhythm of the home. To its quiet expectations. To its steady, unchanging pattern. There is something almost comforting in this preparation. A sense that the day is closing in the right way. That everything is moving toward rest, just as it should. The light continues to fade. The room grows dim. Shadows stretch and blend together, softening the edges of objects until they feel less defined. The world becomes quieter. Smaller. More contained. And within that containment, the child begins to slow. Movements become softer. Steps lighter. Even the smallest sounds seem more noticeable now, standing out in the growing silence. A chair creaks gently. A cloth brushes against wood. A quiet breath fills the space. These sounds do not disturb the calm. They belong to it. They are part of the same gentle rhythm that has carried the entire day. As evening settles in, there may be a final small meal. Again, simple. Measured. Nothing extra. Nothing unnecessary. The child eats quietly. There is no conversation that fills the space with energy or distraction. Only a few soft words, if any. The focus remains on the act itself. On completing what is needed. On moving steadily toward the end of the day. Afterward, there is little left to do. The tasks are finished. The room is in order. The house is quiet. And so, the final transition begins. Not with ceremony. Not with any clear signal. Just a gentle shift from movement to stillness. The child prepares for rest. The small bed waits in the same place as always. The blanket is thin, but familiar. The space is simple, but known. There is comfort in that familiarity. In knowing exactly what to expect. In not needing anything more. The child lies down. The air is cool. The room is dim. Outside, the street has grown almost silent. Only the faintest sounds remain, distant, soft, and far away. And in this quiet, the child begins to drift. Not into vivid dreams or restless thoughts. But into a calm, steady rest. A continuation of the same gentle rhythm. The same quiet understanding. That life moves within certain limits. That expectations remain small. That each day will return in much the same way. And in that understanding, there is peace. Not the kind that comes from abundance or freedom. But the kind that comes from acceptance. From knowing what is. From expecting very little. And finding that it is enough. The night deepens slowly. The last traces of light fade away. The house settles fully into stillness. And the world, once again, grows soft and quiet, holding everything gently, as another day comes to its quiet end. Another morning comes, just as gently as before. There is no sharp beginning. The darkness thins slowly, almost unnoticed, until the room begins to take shape again. The outlines return first, the edge of the bed, the quiet line of the wall, the small window holding a pale gray light. The air feels familiar. Cool. Still. Carrying that same faint trace of smoke that never quite leaves. The child wakes without surprise. There is no sense of a new day being different from the last. Instead, there is a quiet continuation, as though the night was only a brief pause in an ongoing pattern. The eyes open. A breath is taken. And then, gently, the body moves. There is no hesitation. No lingering. The rhythm begins again. The small house stirs in the same quiet way. Somewhere, a soft movement can be heard. A floorboard creaks. A distant sound from outside drifts faintly through the walls. Nothing calls for attention. Nothing breaks the calm. The child rises and begins the first motions of the day. Clothing is adjusted. Simple. Worn. Each piece familiar, carrying the memory of many days just like this one. There is no choice to be made. No variation to consider. And in that lack of choice, there is a quiet ease. Everything is already decided. Everything already known. The floor beneath small steps feels the same. The air feels the same. Even the silence feels the same. And so, the child moves through it without effort, guided by something that no longer needs to be thought about. In Victorian childhood, repetition becomes a kind of quiet teacher. It does not explain. It does not instruct with words. But it shows, again and again, what is expected. And over time, those expectations settle deeply. So deeply that they feel like part of the world itself. The child enters the main room. The table waits. The small objects rest where they were left the night before. Nothing has shifted. Nothing has changed. And this stillness carries a quiet message. That life continues within its boundaries. That each day will follow the same gentle path. The morning tasks begin once more. A cloth is lifted. A surface is wiped. A small object is moved carefully from one place to another. Each action is done with the same steady care. Not rushed. Not delayed. Just completed. And in this completion, there is a quiet sense of order. The world remains as it should be. Outside, the street begins its slow awakening. The same sounds return. A distant cart. Soft footsteps. A door opening, then closing again. These sounds are familiar now. They blend into the background, forming a kind of gentle pattern that repeats each day. The child may pause near the window again. Just for a moment. Looking out at the narrow stretch of sky, at the quiet movement below. There is no strong feeling attached to this view. No longing. No excitement. Just a simple awareness. The world exists beyond the walls, moving steadily, just as it always does. And then, the child turns away. There is no reason to remain. The rhythm continues. Inside, the quiet discipline of the home remains constant. Nothing is spoken loudly. Nothing is expressed in sudden bursts. Instead, everything is guided by a soft, steady presence. An expectation that sits quietly in the air. It does not press. It does not force. But it is always there. And the child feels it. In the way they move. In the way they hold themselves. In the way they return, again and again, to carefulness. There is a small moment where a task is not done perfectly. Perhaps a cloth is placed slightly out of line. Or a movement is just a little too quick. The correction comes not through harsh words, but through something quieter. A glance. A pause. A subtle shift in the atmosphere. And the child understands. Without being told. The movement is adjusted. The cloth is straightened. The rhythm is restored. This is how learning happens here. Gently. Repeatedly. Without disruption. And over time, it shapes everything. The way the child thinks. The way the child feels. The way the child understands what is possible, and what is not. The idea of expecting more does not take root. It does not grow. Because there is nothing in the daily rhythm that suggests it should. Instead, the focus remains close. Close to the present moment. Close to what is needed. Close to what is already given. The morning light grows slightly stronger. But it remains soft, filtered through the narrow space of the street. The buildings stand as they always have, tall and close, holding everything in a contained world. And within that world, the child continues. Small steps. Quiet movements. A steady presence that blends into the rhythm of the day. There is no urgency. No rush towards something greater. Just a calm continuation. A gentle unfolding of the same pattern. And in that pattern, the child becomes more certain of their place. Not in a loud or defined way. But in a quiet, settled way. A knowing that does not need to be spoken. A sense that life is already shaped. Already formed. And that the role they play within it is simple, clear, and unchanging. The hours move forward. Softly. almost without being noticed. The tasks continue. The quiet lessons repeat. And with each repetition, the same understanding deepens. That life does not promise expansion. That it does not offer endless paths. That it remains steady and contained. And within that containment, there is a kind of calm. A stillness that does not resist. A quiet acceptance that grows stronger with time. The child does not question this. There is no reason to. Because this is all that has been known. All that has been felt. All that has been lived. And so, the day continues. Just as the days before it. Just as the days that will follow. Moving gently, steadily, without change. And carrying the child with it, deeper into a life shaped by quiet expectations, soft boundaries, and the simple understanding that very little is asked, and very little is ever expected in return. The morning continues its gentle unfolding. There is no clear moment when it deepens, only a soft sense that time is moving forward. The light grows a little more present, though it never becomes bright or sharp. It rests quietly along the edges of things, touching wood, cloth, and the still air of the room. The child remains within the same steady rhythm. Each movement feels known. Each action already understood. There is no searching for what comes next, no pause to decide. The day carries itself forward, and the child follows without resistance. A small task is completed. Then another. Each one simple, each one part of a larger pattern that stretches across the hours. The hands move carefully. The steps remain light. The voice, when used, stays soft. And in this softness, the atmosphere of the home remains unchanged. There is a quiet order here. An order that does not shift or expand. It holds everything gently in place. Even the smallest changes feel noticeable. If a cup is placed slightly differently, it stands out. If a movement is just a little too quick, it feels out of step. And so, the child learns to adjust constantly. To move in a way that blends into the surroundings. To act without drawing attention. To exist quietly within the space provided. Outside, the street continues its slow pattern. The sounds rise and fall, never becoming overwhelming. A cart passes. Footsteps echo briefly. A distant voice drifts through the air, then disappears. These sounds are part of the background now. They do not interrupt the day. They simply mark its passing. The child may step outside again. Only for a short while. The air carries that same mixture of coolness and faint smoke. It settles lightly on the skin, neither sharp nor warm. Other children are present, as before. They move carefully, each one following their own quiet rhythm. There is no loud gathering. No wide, open play. Just small moments of connection. A shared glance. A few quiet words. A brief, simple game that begins and ends without drawing attention. Even here, outside the home, the same expectations remain. To be calm. To be careful. To take up little space. And so, the child returns inside once more. There is no hesitation. No sense of leaving something behind. Because nothing here is meant to last very long. Every moment is temporary. Every action leads gently into the next. Inside, the air feels still again. The light has shifted slightly, beginning its slow movement toward midday. The house remains unchanged. Steady. Quiet. Contained. And within it, the child continues to learn. Not through words, but through repetition. Through observation. through the quiet understanding that grows deeper with each passing hour. There is a small pause. A moment where nothing is required. The child stands still. The room holds its silence. And in that silence, there is a kind of calm. Not the calm of freedom, but the calm of certainty. Of knowing exactly where one belongs. Exactly what is expected. Exactly what the day will bring. This certainty removes the need for questions. It removes the need for wondering about what could be different. And so, the mind remains still. Close to the present. Close to what is. The pause ends. It always does. Another task waits. A small movement begins. And the rhythm continues. In Victorian childhood, this rhythm shapes everything. It creates a world where expectations remain quiet and limited. Where life is not filled with sudden change. Where each day mirrors the one before it. And within that mirror, the child begins to see their future. Not as something unknown, but as something already forming. Already decided. Already contained within the same gentle boundaries. The light grows a little stronger for a brief time. Midday approaches. The air holds a soft stillness. Even the sounds outside seem to pause slightly, as if the world itself is resting. Inside, a small meal is prepared again. Nothing elaborate. Nothing different. Just the same simple nourishment. The same careful portions. The same quiet act of eating. The child sits. Moves slowly. Each bite measured. Each moment calm. There is no conversation to fill the space. No distraction. Only the steady presence of the moment itself. And in that presence, the same quiet lesson remains. That enough is enough. That nothing more is needed. After the meal, the stillness returns once more. A brief space. A gentle pause. The child does not rush to fill it. But neither do they stretch it longer than it should be. Because even stillness has its place within the rhythm. It is allowed, but only for a moment. Then the movement begins again. The afternoon waits just beyond this pause. The light begins its slow change. The shadows prepare to lengthen. And the world continues, steady and calm. The child rises. Returns to the small tasks. The quiet responsibilities. The same careful movements that shape each part of the day. And with each repetition, the same understanding grows stronger. That life does not expand outward. That it does not open into endless possibilities. But instead, it moves gently within a defined space. A space that feels both limiting, and strangely peaceful. Because within that space, everything is known. Everything is expected. Everything is steady. And in that steadiness, there is a kind of rest. A quiet place where the child can exist without needing to reach for more. The light shifts again. Midday begins to pass. The afternoon slowly takes its place. And the rhythm continues, soft, unbroken, and endlessly familiar. The afternoon returns again, in its quiet and familiar way. There is no clear beginning to it. The light simply softens, the warmth fades slightly, and the day continues without pause. Everything feels as it has before, steady, contained, and calm. Inside the house, the same stillness settles gently over each room. The child moves through it with quiet certainty. There is no hesitation now. No need to think about what comes next. The rhythm has become part of the body itself. A small task is taken up. A cloth folded carefully. An object returned to its place. Each action follows the last, without interruption. There is a softness to these movements. A careful balance between doing too much and doing too little. The child has learned where that balance rests. Not through instruction, but through repetition. Through many small corrections. Through the quiet guidance of the world around them. Outside, the street carries on its slow pattern. The sounds are fewer now. Less frequent. A distant cart rolls by, its wheels turning steadily. A pair of footsteps passes, then fades into silence. A door closes somewhere, gently but firmly. These sounds feel far away, even when they are near. They do not draw attention. They simply exist. And the child remains within the quiet space of the home. There is a moment when the child pauses again. Standing near the window. Looking out. The narrow sky stretches above, pale and distant. The buildings hold their place, unchanged. Nothing seems to shift. Nothing seems to call for anything more. And so, the child does not reach outward. There is no sense of needing to go beyond. Only a quiet awareness that this is where they are meant to be. The moment passes. As all moments do. And the rhythm continues. In Victorian childhood, this quiet acceptance forms slowly. It does not arrive suddenly. It builds, piece by piece, through each repeated day. Through each small task. Through each gentle correction. Through each quiet understanding that settles into place. The idea of wanting more does not disappear completely. But it remains distant. Soft. Unformed. There is nothing in the daily rhythm that encourages it to grow. And so, it stays small. Barely noticeable. The child returns to movement. A small sound is made, the brushing of fabric, the light step across the floor. Even these sounds feel measured. Part of the same careful world. Nothing is wasted. Not time. Not effort. Not even sound. Everything is kept within quiet boundaries. The light shifts again. The afternoon deepens. Shadows stretch longer across the floor, softening the edges of objects. The room begins to feel dimmer, though not yet dark. The air cools slightly. A faint draft moves through the space, carrying with it the distant scent of smoke and damp stone. The child feels this change. Not with thought, but with a quiet awareness. The day is moving forward. As it always does. Toward evening. Toward rest. And so, the tasks continue, but they begin to slow. There are fewer now. Smaller. More gentle. A final adjustment here. A last careful movement there. Everything preparing, in its own quiet way, for the end of the day. There is no rush to finish. No urgency to complete everything quickly. Because the rhythm does not demand speed. Only steadiness. Only care. The child follows this without question. Without resistance. Each action flows into the next. Until, gradually, there is nothing left to be done. And then, there is stillness. A deeper stillness than before. One that settles into the room like a soft layer of quiet. The child remains within it. Standing. Or sitting. Not thinking of what comes next. Because what comes next is already known. Evening will arrive. The same small routines will follow. The same quiet transition from day to night. This knowing removes the need for anticipation. There is no waiting. No wondering. Just a calm acceptance of what is already certain. Outside, the street begins to draw inward. The movement slows further. Fewer footsteps pass by. Doors close more often. Windows dim. The world begins to quiet itself. And inside, the same process unfolds. The house prepares for night. A table is cleared once more. Objects are returned to their places. The floor is brushed lightly. Each action part of a familiar closing. The child takes part in this without pause. By now, it feels as natural as breathing. The hands move gently. The steps remain soft. The presence remains quiet. Everything moves toward rest. The light fades further. The room grows dim. Shadows blend together. The outlines of objects soften until they feel almost part of the darkness itself. There is a calm here. A deep, steady calm. Not filled with thought. Not filled with feeling. Just present. The child prepares for sleep. The small bed waits, unchanged. The blanket rests where it always has. The space feels known, familiar, safe in its quiet simplicity. There is no need for anything more. No expectation of comfort beyond what is already there. And so, the child lies down. The air is cool. The room is still. Outside, the last faint sounds drift away. A distant movement. A soft closing of a door. Then quiet again. The child closes their eyes. There is no rush into sleep. No drifting through restless thoughts. Just a slow, gentle settling. The same rhythm that carried the day now carries the body into rest. And within that rest, the same understanding remains. Soft. Steady. Unchanged. That life moves within its quiet limits. That expectations remain small. That each day will follow the same gentle path. And that within that path, there is a kind of peace. A calm that does not ask for more. A stillness that does not need to grow. Just a quiet presence, continuing, day after day, without interruption. The night deepens. The house grows silent. And once again, everything rests, waiting softly for another day to begin in exactly the same way. Morning returns again, as it always does. It comes quietly, without announcement, without urgency. The darkness fades in slow, gentle layers until the room begins to take shape once more. The small bed, the plain wall, the narrow window, all reappear in soft gray light. The air is cool. Still. Unchanged. The child wakes with the same calm awareness. There is no surprise in the new day. No expectation that anything will be different. Instead, there is a quiet continuation, as though the night was only a brief pause in an unbroken rhythm. The eyes open. A breath is taken. And the body begins to move. Slowly. Carefully. Just as before. The floor creaks softly beneath small steps. The sound is familiar now, part of the quiet language of the house. Nothing about it feels new or unexpected. It simply belongs. The morning begins. Again. Clothing is adjusted. Simple, worn, and known. There is no choice in what to wear, no variation to consider. Each piece serves its purpose, nothing more. And in that simplicity, there is a kind of quiet ease. Nothing to decide. Nothing to change. Only to continue. The child moves into the main room. Everything is as it was left. The table stands in place. The small objects rest where they belong. The air holds that same faint scent, coal, wood, and the soft trace of time itself. Nothing has shifted. And that sameness brings a quiet sense of order. The day unfolds from here, just as it always does. The first small task begins. A cloth is lifted. A surface is wiped. The movement is gentle, steady, and careful. There is no rush. No delay. Only a quiet completion. The hands know exactly what to do. There is no need to think. This is how the rhythm deepens. Through repetition that becomes instinct. Through actions that no longer require effort. Through a pattern that feels as natural as breathing. Outside, the street begins its slow awakening once more. The same distant sounds return. A cart rolling over stone. Footsteps passing in measured pace. A door opening, then closing again. These sounds drift into the room, soft and distant. They do not interrupt. They simply exist. The child hears them without turning. Without pausing. Because they are part of the background now. Part of the steady world that surrounds everything. The morning light grows slightly stronger. But it remains soft. Filtered. Contained by the narrow space between buildings. Nothing feels open or wide. Everything feels close. Defined. Held gently within invisible boundaries. And within those boundaries, the child continues to move. Quietly. Carefully. A second task follows the first. Then another. Each one small. Each one necessary. Together, they shape the early hours of the day. There is no sense of achievement. No moment of pride. Only a quiet understanding that things are being done as they should be. And that is enough. In this world, enough holds a quiet importance. It does not reach beyond itself. It does not grow into more. It remains steady. Contained. Complete in its simplicity. The child pauses briefly. A small space between actions. The room is still. The light rests softly on the table. Dust moves faintly in the air, almost too subtle to see. There is a calm here. A deep, quiet calm. Not filled with thought. Not filled with questions. Just present. And then, as always, the moment passes. The rhythm continues. There is something else to be done. Something small. Something simple. And the child returns to movement. In Victorian childhood, this steady pattern shapes more than just the day. It shapes expectation itself. Over time, the child learns not to look beyond what is already there. Not to reach for something unseen. Not to imagine a life that moves differently. Because nothing in the daily rhythm suggests that such a life exists. And so, expectation remains quiet. Small. Contained within the same gentle boundaries as everything else. Outside, other children move through the street again. They walk close to their homes. Their movements are careful. Their voices remain soft. There is no loud laughter. No running without direction. Just a quiet presence. A shared understanding that life is not meant to stretch too far. That each step has its place. Each moment its limit. The child may step outside briefly. The air feels familiar. Cool. Carrying that faint scent that never fully fades. The sky above is pale, seen only in narrow pieces between the buildings. It does not feel wide. It does not invite wandering. It simply exists. And so, the child does not linger. There is no reason to. The rhythm calls them back. Softly. And they follow. Inside, the same stillness waits. The same quiet order. The same gentle expectation that everything will continue as it always has. The morning deepens. The light shifts slowly. Time moves forward without drawing attention to itself. And the child moves with it. Without resistance. Without question. Each step part of the same steady flow. Each action part of the same quiet pattern. And within that pattern, something settles even deeper. A calm understanding. That life does not change suddenly. That it does not open into something wide or uncertain. But instead continues, day after day, in this same gentle, measured way. And in that continuation, there is a kind of peace. Not bright. Not expressive. But soft. Steady. Reliable. The child remains within it. Moving through the hours. Learning without being told. Understanding without needing words. And as the morning carries on, the same quiet lesson remains. That very little is expected. And so, very little is imagined. And in that small, steady space, life continues, calm and unbroken. The morning continues, gently and without interruption. There is no sudden change in the light, no clear signal that time has moved forward. It simply deepens, almost silently, until the room feels a little more awake, a little more filled with the soft presence of day. The child remains within the same quiet rhythm. Each movement feels settled now. There is no hesitation, no uncertainty. The pattern has been repeated so many times that it no longer needs attention. It simply happens. A small object is lifted and placed down again. A surface is brushed. A chair is moved slightly, just enough to return it to its proper place. Each action is careful, measured, balanced. Nothing is done too quickly. Nothing is left undone. And in this balance, the calm of the home is preserved. The air holds its stillness. It does not shift or stir much. Even the smallest movement feels noticeable, as though the room itself is quietly aware of everything within it. The child moves softly, almost blending into that stillness. Becoming part of it. Outside, the street continues its steady life. The sounds rise and fall in quiet patterns. A cart moves somewhere in the distance. Footsteps pass by, then fade. A voice drifts briefly through the air, low and indistinct. None of these sounds linger. They come and go, like soft waves that never disturb the calm surface of the day. The child may hear them, but does not turn. There is no reason to look. The world outside exists, but it does not call strongly. It does not invite. It simply continues. And the child remains where they are. Within the small, known space of the home. This sense of place grows stronger over time. Not as something that restricts, but as something that defines. A quiet understanding of where one belongs. Of what is expected within that space. Of how to move without disturbing the balance. The child pauses for a moment. Standing still. The room is calm. The light rests gently on the floor. There is no thought pressing forward. No need to imagine what comes next. Because what comes next is already known. Another task. Another small movement. Another quiet continuation of the same steady day. And so, the pause ends. The rhythm resumes. In Victorian childhood, the idea of ambition does not take the same shape as it might elsewhere. There is no constant push towards something greater. No encouragement to expand beyond what is already given. Instead, there is a quiet emphasis on maintaining. On preserving order. On continuing what has always been. And this emphasis shapes expectation. It keeps it small. Gentle. Contained. The child learns not to look far ahead. not to imagine distant possibilities, but to remain close to the present, to what is known, to what is certain. The morning light shifts slightly. It moves across the room in slow, careful lines, touching the edges of objects, fading in some places, lingering in others. Everything feels soft, muted, as though the world itself is speaking in a quiet voice. The child moves again. Another small task. A simple action. The repetition continues. Not heavy. Not tiring. Just steady. Like a soft rhythm that carries everything forward. Outside, other children pass by. They walk quietly, close to their homes. Their steps measured. Their voices low. There is no sense of wide, open play. No loud gathering. Just the same careful presence. Each child moving within their own small space. Each one shaped by the same quiet expectations. The child notices this, though not in words. Just a feeling. A recognition. That this is how things are. That this is how things remain. And in that recognition, there is no question. No desire for something different. Only acceptance. The morning continues. Time moves forward. The light grows a little fuller, though never bright. The air remains cool. The house remains still. And the child continues within it. Small steps. Quiet hands. A steady presence that blends into the rhythm of the day. There is comfort here. Not in abundance. Not in change. But in sameness. In knowing what each moment will bring. In not needing to wonder. This comfort is subtle. Almost invisible. But it holds everything together. It allows the child to move through the day without resistance. Without uncertainty. Without the need to expect more than what is already there. The tasks continue. One after another. Each one small. Each one necessary. Together, they fill the hours. They create a structure that does not leave space for restlessness. Or for longing. Or for imagining a different path. And so, the child remains steady. Calm. Quiet. The world outside continues to shift in its gentle way. The sounds come and go. The light moves slowly. The air changes almost imperceptibly. But inside, everything remains constant. Everything remains as it should be. The child pauses once more. A small stillness. A quiet moment. And in that moment, the same understanding rests softly beneath everything. That life moves within its given shape. That expectations remain small. That there is no need to reach beyond what is already known. This understanding does not feel heavy. It does not feel limiting. It simply feels natural. Like something that has always been there. Like something that does not need to be questioned. The pause fades. The movement returns. And the morning continues, steady, calm, and unbroken. Midday begins to gather once more, quietly and without notice. The morning does not end in a clear way. It simply softens, shifts, and becomes something else. The light grows a little fuller for a short time, resting gently across the room, touching the worn surfaces with a pale and steady glow. The child feels this change without thinking about it. A small warmth in the air. A quiet fullness in the light. A sense that the day has reached its middle. Inside the house, nothing has changed. Everything remains in its place. The table stands as it always does. The chair rests quietly nearby. The faint scent of coal and wood lingers, unchanged. There is a calm here that does not move. A stillness that holds everything gently. And within that stillness, the child continues. A small task is completed. Then another. Each one simple. Each one part of the same steady pattern. The hands move without hesitation. The steps remain soft. The rhythm carries forward, just as it always has. There is no need to think about what comes next. The next moment is already known. Already waiting. This knowing brings a quiet ease. Not excitement. Not anticipation. Just a calm certainty. A small meal is prepared. It happens in the same quiet way as before. Bread. Perhaps something warm, though never much. The portions are careful. Measured. Nothing extra. Nothing wasted. The child sits. There is no rush. No distraction. Only the soft, steady act of eating. Each bite taken slowly. Each moment held in quiet balance. The room remains still. The sounds are minimal. A faint movement here. A soft shift there. Everything contained within the same gentle atmosphere. Food, like everything else, is simple. It serves its purpose. It supports the day. But it does not offer more than that. And in this, another quiet lesson continues to settle. That life does not need to be filled with abundance. That enough is enough. After the meal, there is a pause. A small stillness. The kind that feels like a soft space between breaths. The child remains quiet. Not thinking. Not wandering. Just present. The light rests gently in the room. Dust moves faintly in the air. The world feels calm. And then, as always, the pause ends. It does not linger. It does not stretch into something more. Because the rhythm continues. There is always something waiting. The child rises again. Returns to the small tasks. The quiet responsibilities. The same careful movements that shape each part of the day. Outside, the street carries on its slow pattern. The sounds return, soft and distant. A cart passes. Footsteps echo briefly. A door closes. These sounds drift through the air, never staying long. They mark the passage of time without interrupting it. The child hears them, but does not follow them. There is no pull outward. No sense of needing to go beyond. Only a quiet awareness that the world continues, just as it always has. Inside, the same steady order remains. Nothing changes. Nothing shifts. And in that sameness, the child continues to learn. Not through words, but through living. Through repetition. Through the quiet shaping of each moment. The lessons grow deeper. That life is not wide. That it does not stretch into endless possibilities. But instead moves within a defined space. A space that remains constant. A space that does not invite expansion. And within that space, expectations remain small. Gentle. Contained. The light begins to soften again. Midday starts its slow movement toward afternoon. The warmth fades slightly. The shadows begin to stretch, just a little. The air cools once more. The child feels this shift, though it is barely noticeable. A subtle change. A quiet signal. The day is moving forward. As it always does. The tasks continue, but they begin to slow. There are fewer now. Smaller. More gentle. A final movement here. A careful adjustment there. Everything preparing, slowly, for the next transition. There is no rush to complete anything. No urgency to finish. Because time does not press. It simply moves. And the child moves with it. Calm. Steady. Quiet. The room grows softer in tone. The edges of objects blur slightly as the light changes. The world feels smaller. More contained. And within that contained space, the child remains. There is comfort in this. Not in the sense of warmth or ease. But in the sense of knowing. Of certainty. Of not needing to expect anything beyond what is already present. The same understanding continues to settle deeper. That life does not offer more than this. That it does not need to. That what is here, is enough. And so, the child does not reach beyond it. Does not imagine something larger. Does not ask for change. Only continues. One moment into the next. One quiet action into another. The afternoon begins to take shape. Softly. Without interruption. And the rhythm carries on, unbroken, guiding the child gently forward, within a world that remains calm, steady, and unchanged. The afternoon settles again, softly, and without effort. It feels familiar now, this gentle shift in the day. The light dims just slightly, the warmth fades, and a quiet stillness begins to gather once more. Nothing announces this change. It simply arrives, like a slow breath that moves through the house and the narrow street beyond. Inside, everything remains in its place. The table stands where it has always stood. The chair rests quietly nearby. The air carries that same faint scent, unchanged and steady. The child moves through the space with quiet certainty. There is no need to look around. No need to pause and decide. Each step is already known. Each action already understood. A small task begins. A cloth lifted. A surface brushed lightly. The movement is careful. Measured. Nothing rushed. Nothing delayed. Just a quiet continuation of what has always been. The rhythm feels softer now. Slower. As if the day itself is growing tired. The child follows this slowing without resistance. Movements become lighter. Quieter. Even the smallest sounds feel more noticeable in the deepening calm. Outside, the street reflects this change. The earlier movement fades. Fewer footsteps pass. The sound of wheels grows distant. Doors begin to close more often. Windows dim. The world starts to draw inward. And inside, the same quiet preparation begins. Not with urgency. Not with effort. But with a gentle series of small actions. The child adjusts a chair. Returns an object to its place. Smooths a surface that has already been smoothed many times before. Each action is part of a familiar pattern. Each one leading slowly toward the end of the day. There is no sense of finishing something important. No feeling of accomplishment. Only a quiet awareness that the day is moving toward its natural close. The light continues to soften. Shadows stretch gently across the floor. The edges of the room begin to blur. Everything feels calmer. More contained. The child pauses. A small moment of stillness. Standing quietly. The room holds its silence. Nothing moves. Nothing calls for attention. And in this stillness, there is a deep sense of calm. Not the kind that comes from rest or comfort. But the kind that comes from knowing. From certainty. From the steady repetition of a life that does not change. The pause does not last long. It never does. there is always one more small thing to be done. One more gentle movement. And so, the child continues. In Victorian childhood, this quiet cycle repeats endlessly. Morning into midday. Midday into afternoon. Afternoon into evening. Each part blending into the next. Each one carrying the same quiet expectations. The same gentle boundaries. Over time, this repetition becomes more than routine. It becomes understanding. A deep, steady sense that life will always follow this pattern. That it will not open suddenly into something different. That it will remain calm and contained. And within that understanding, expectation becomes smaller still. There is no reaching beyond. No imagining of something larger. Only a quiet acceptance of what is already known. Outside, the sky begins to deepen in tone. The pale light fades into something softer. Clouds stretch thin across the narrow view above. The air cools again. The faint scent of smoke grows stronger. It drifts slowly through the street, through small openings, into the quiet spaces of the home. The child notices this, not with thought, but with feeling. The day is ending. The rhythm is shifting. And the same gentle process begins. The final tasks of the day. Small. Careful. Unhurried. The table is cleared. Each item lifted with quiet attention. The floor is brushed lightly. The room is set back into its simple order. Nothing is left out of place. Nothing is forgotten. Everything returns to its proper position. The child takes part in this as naturally as breathing. There is no need for instruction. No need for reminder. The pattern is complete within them. And in following it, there is a quiet sense of calm. A feeling that things are as they should be. That the day has moved correctly from beginning to end. The light fades further. The room grows dim. Shadows blend together. The world becomes softer. Quieter. More still. The sounds outside grow faint. A distant movement. A soft closing of a door. Then silence again. The child prepares for rest. The small bed waits. Unchanged. Familiar. The blanket lies where it always does. Thin, but enough. There is no expectation of comfort beyond this. No desire for more. Only a quiet acceptance. The child lies down. The air is cool. The room is still. Everything feels calm. The eyes close slowly. The body settles. There are no restless thoughts. No drifting into something distant. Only a gentle continuation of the same steady rhythm. The same quiet understanding that has shaped every part of the day. That life moves within its limits. That expectations remain small. That each day will return, again and again, just as this one has. And within that understanding, there is peace. Soft. Steady. Unchanging. The night deepens. The house falls into complete stillness. And everything rests, quietly, gently, as another day comes to its calm and familiar end. The night rests quietly over everything. There is a stillness that feels complete, as though the world itself has settled into a gentle pause. The small house holds its silence. The narrow street outside has grown soft and distant, its earlier movements now faded into quiet memory. Nothing calls. Nothing stirs. Only the faintest traces of sound remain, barely noticeable, a distant shift, a soft echo that comes and goes like a slow breath. Inside, the child sleeps. The rest is calm. Even. Unbroken. It is not filled with vivid dreams or wandering thoughts. Instead, it carries the same steady rhythm that shaped the day, continuing quietly through the night. Time passes without being marked. There are no hours counted here. No moments measured. Only a slow, gentle movement forward, as darkness gradually gives way once more. Morning begins again. Not suddenly. Not clearly. Just a soft lightening of the air. The darkness lifts in layers, so gradual that it almost goes unnoticed. The window holds a faint gray glow. The outlines of the room return. The bed. The wall. The small objects resting where they were left. Everything reappears, unchanged. The child stirs. There is no rush to wake. No sudden movement. Just a quiet return to awareness. Eyes opening slowly. A breath taken. And then, without hesitation, the body begins to move. The day has started again. And it feels exactly as it did before. The air is cool. Still. Carrying that same faint scent that never fades. The floor creaks softly beneath small steps. The sound is familiar. Comforting in its sameness. Nothing about this moment feels new. Nothing feels different. And in that repetition, there is a quiet sense of certainty. The child dresses. Simple clothing. Worn. Known. There is no choice to be made. No variation to consider. Everything is already decided. And so, the process is smooth. Effortless. The body moves through it without thought. Into the main room once more. The table stands in its place. The chair rests quietly nearby. The air feels unchanged. Still. Calm. Everything exactly as it should be. The first task begins. A cloth lifted. A surface wiped. The movement steady. Careful. Nothing rushed. Nothing delayed. Each action part of the same quiet pattern. The hands know what to do. The body follows. There is no need for instruction. This is how the rhythm continues. Day after day. Unbroken. In Victorian childhood, this repetition becomes the foundation of understanding. Not something questioned. Not something explained. But something lived. And through living it, the child learns that life moves in cycles. That each day mirrors the one before. That nothing shifts suddenly. That nothing expands beyond its boundaries. And so, expectation remains small. Quiet. Contained. Outside, the street begins to wake once more. The same distant sounds return. A cart moving slowly. Footsteps passing. A door opening, then closing again. These sounds feel like echoes of yesterday. Because they are. The world repeats itself. And the child moves within that repetition. The light grows slightly stronger. But it remains soft. Filtered through the narrow space between buildings. Nothing feels open. Nothing feels wide. Everything is held close. Defined. Contained. The child steps through the morning. Small movements. Quiet tasks. Each action blending into the next. There is no pause for wondering. No space for imagining something beyond this. Because there is no reason to. Everything needed is already here. Everything expected is already known. The rhythm continues. A second task. A third. Each one simple. Each one necessary. Together, they fill the time. They create a structure that holds the day in place. The child pauses briefly. Standing still. The room is quiet. The light rests gently across the table. Dust moves faintly in the air. There is a calm here. Deep. Steady. Unchanging. And within that calm, the same understanding rests. That life will continue in this way. That tomorrow will be the same. That the days will follow one another without difference. This understanding does not feel heavy. It does not feel limiting. It simply feels true. Like something that has always been known. The pause fades. The movement returns. And the morning continues. Outside, other children appear again. Moving quietly. Staying close. Their presence mirrors the child's own. Each one shaped by the same gentle expectations. Each one moving within the same quiet boundaries. There is no loud gathering. No wide play. Only small moments. Brief and careful. And then, a return to tasks. The child notices this, in a quiet way. A shared understanding. A silent agreement between all who move through this world. That life is not meant to stretch too far. That it remains close. Contained. And in that containment, there is a kind of peace. The morning deepens. The light shifts. Time moves forward without drawing attention to itself. And the child continues. Calm. Steady. Quiet. Learning without being told. Understanding without needing words. And with each passing moment, the same gentle lesson remains. That very little is expected. And so, very little is imagined. And within that small, steady space, life continues, soft and unbroken, carried gently forward by the quiet rhythm of each familiar day. The morning moves forward in its quiet, familiar way. Nothing interrupts its flow. Nothing calls attention to the passing of time. The light shifts gently across the room, resting for a moment on the table, then slowly drifting toward the wall, as if it, too, follows the same steady rhythm. The child continues within this rhythm. Each movement is soft. Each action already known. There is no hesitation, no need to think about what comes next. The pattern of the day unfolds naturally, one small task leading into another. A cloth is folded. A surface is brushed. A small object is placed carefully where it belongs. These actions repeat, as they always do. They are not tiring. Not difficult. Just steady. And in that steadiness, there is a quiet sense of calm. The air remains still. Cool. Carrying that faint scent that has become part of everything. It does not change. It does not fade. It simply exists, like the walls, like the floor, like the quiet presence of the home itself. Outside, the street continues its gentle awakening. The same sounds return. A cart rolling slowly over stone. Footsteps passing in a measured pace. A door opening, then closing again. Nothing new. Nothing unexpected. Everything repeating in the same quiet way. The child hears these sounds without turning. They do not draw attention. They do not invite curiosity. They simply mark the passing of time, like a soft rhythm that exists beyond the walls. Inside, the stillness holds. The house remains calm. Nothing is out of place. Nothing calls for change. And so, the child continues. Small steps. Quiet hands. A steady presence that blends into the room. There is a moment when the child pauses again. Standing near the window. Looking out at the narrow view of the street below. The sky above is pale, soft, barely visible between the buildings. It does not feel wide. It does not feel distant. It simply exists, as everything does. There is no longing in this moment. No desire to reach beyond. Only a quiet observation. A simple awareness. And then, the moment passes. The child turns away. There is always something else to be done. The rhythm continues. In Victorian childhood, this constant return to small tasks shapes the way time is experienced. There are no long stretches of freedom. No empty hours waiting to be filled. Instead, each moment is gently guided. Each part of the day given its place. And within that structure, the child learns to move without resistance. Without question. The idea of asking for more does not grow. It remains small, quiet, unformed, because there is nothing in the daily rhythm that encourages it. Instead, there is a steady return to what is already present, to what is already known, to what is already enough. The morning light grows slightly fuller. Midday approaches once more. The air holds a soft warmth for a brief time. The room feels just a little brighter. But even this change is gentle, contained. It does not disturb the calm. A small meal is prepared again. Simple. Measured. Nothing extra. Nothing unnecessary. The child sits. Eats slowly. Each bite taken with quiet care. There is no conversation filling the space. No distraction. Only the soft, steady act of eating. And in that simplicity, the same lesson continues to settle. That life does not need more than this. That enough remains enough. After the meal, there is a pause. A quiet stillness. The child remains calm. The room holds its silence. Nothing moves. Nothing changes. And in that stillness, there is a sense of completion. Not of something finished, but of something continuing exactly as it should. The pause does not last long. It never does. The rhythm resumes. Another small task. Another careful movement. The day carries forward. Outside, the street begins its slow shift toward afternoon. The sounds soften. The movement becomes less frequent. The world draws inward, just slightly. And inside, the same pattern follows. The light begins to change. The warmth fades. The shadows stretch gently across the floor. The child continues within this shift. There is no awareness of transition. Only a quiet acceptance of each moment as it comes. The tasks grow fewer, smaller, more gentle. Everything preparing, slowly, for the later hours of the day. There is no rush to complete anything. No urgency. Because time moves steadily, without pressure. And the child moves with it. Calm. Careful. Quiet. The room feels softer now. The edges of objects begin to blur as the light fades. The air cools once more. The same faint scent lingers, unchanged. And within this calm, the child remains. There is comfort here. Not in variety. Not in change. But in sameness. In knowing what will come next. In not needing to expect anything more. The same understanding continues to deepen. That life moves within its given shape. That expectations remain small. That there is no need to reach beyond what is already here. And so, the day continues. Gently. Steadily. Without interruption. Carrying the child forward, one quiet moment at a time, within a world that remains calm, contained, and endlessly familiar. The afternoon settles once more into its quieter shape. The light, already softened from earlier, begins to fade a little more with each passing moment. It does not do this suddenly. It never does. Instead, it feels like a slow loosening, as if the day is gently letting go of its own brightness. Inside the house, the stillness grows deeper. Not heavier. Just deeper. The child moves through it in the same steady rhythm that has carried every part of the day before this one. There is no change in pace, no change in feeling. Only the quiet continuation of familiar actions. A small surface is cleared. A cloth is folded and set aside. An object is adjusted slightly, then left in place. Everything is done with care that no longer needs thought. It has become natural. Like something learned long ago and never forgotten. The room remains simple. Unchanging. The same objects, in the same positions, holding the same quiet presence they always have. There is comfort in this repetition, though it is a quiet kind of comfort. Not warm or expressive, but steady. Predictable. The child pauses for a brief moment. Standing still. The air feels cooler now, as it always does when the afternoon begins to turn. There is a faint sense of distance in the light, as though it is slowly withdrawing from the room. Nothing feels urgent. Nothing feels unfinished. And yet, the rhythm continues anyway. Because it always does. Outside, the street reflects the same slow transition. The movement that marked earlier hours has softened. Fewer footsteps pass. The sound of wheels is less frequent. Voices are quieter now, spaced farther apart, fading quickly into the air. The world is beginning to settle. To draw inward. To prepare, in its own quiet way, for evening. The child does not watch for long. There is no need to remain at the window. The view is always the same. The narrow sky. The close buildings. The familiar street that never changes its shape. So the child turns away. There is still work to be done. Even if it is small. Even if it is gentle. In Victorian life, even the late hours of the day are not empty. They are simply quieter versions of what came before. The same structure remains. The same expectations. Only softened by time. And so, the child continues. A final small task. Then another. Each one simple enough to complete without thought. Each one part of the same steady pattern that holds the entire day together. There is no sense of urgency. No feeling of needing to finish quickly. Only the quiet awareness that the day is slowly approaching its end. The light, sounds soften. Movements become fewer. Even the air seems to settle more deeply into place. There is a calm here that does not ask for attention. It simply exists. And within it, the child remains. The final tasks are completed. One by one. Nothing large. Nothing demanding. Just small actions that bring the day gently toward closure. A surface cleared. A space set in order. Everything returned to its quiet arrangement. There is a sense of completion, though it is not dramatic. It does not stand out. It simply feels right. As if the day has followed its expected shape without interruption. And now, it is ready to end. The child pauses again. Longer this time. The room is dimmer now. The light has thinned into soft gray tones. The outlines of objects are less sharp, more blended into the quiet atmosphere of the house. There is no sound that stands out. Only stillness. A deep, even stillness that wraps around everything gently. And in that stillness, there is the same quiet understanding that has been present all along. That the day will not offer anything beyond this. That nothing more is expected. That everything has already been done. This understanding does not feel like a thought. It feels like a presence. Something steady beneath everything else. The child does not question it. There is no reason to. It is simply the way things are. The transition toward night continues slowly. The room grows darker. The air cooler. The world outside quieter still. And inside, everything begins to settle into rest. The child prepares for sleep once more. The small bed waits in its familiar place. Unchanged. Simple. Known. There is nothing more needed than this. No additional comfort. No extra thought. Only the quiet space of rest. The child lies down. The room is nearly still now. The faintest sounds remain outside, but they are distant, softened by the growing night. There is no effort to sleep. No drifting of thoughts into distant places. Only a slow, gentle settling inward. As if the body remembers this rhythm as well as the day itself. And as sleep comes closer, the same understanding remains. Soft. Unspoken. Constant. That life continues in its steady cycle. That expectations remain small. That each day follows the same quiet path. And that within this path, there is nothing missing. Nothing needing to be added. Only the calm repetition of what has always been. The night deepens once more. And everything rests. Quiet. Still. Unbroken. The night does not rush. It never does. It simply deepens, slowly and without disturbance, like a soft curtain settling over the world. The house rests within it, unchanged in shape, unchanged in feeling, holding its quiet stillness as if it has always been that way. Inside, the child sleeps. The breathing is slow. Even. Untroubled. There are no vivid dreams that pull the mind far away. No sudden images or restless thoughts breaking the calm. Instead, there is only a quiet continuity, as though even sleep follows the same gentle rhythm that shapes the day. Time passes without being marked. There is no sound to measure it. No light to guide it. Only a steady movement forward that cannot be seen, only felt in the gradual thinning of darkness. And then, very softly, morning begins again. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with force. It simply appears in faint layers of gray, slowly lifting the night from the edges of the room. The window becomes slightly visible. Then the outline of the wall. Then the bed, still and simple, waiting in its familiar place. The air is cool. Familiar. The same air that has always been there. The child stirs. Not suddenly. Not with urgency. Just a quiet return to awareness, as if waking is only another step in the same long, unbroken rhythm. Eyes open. A breath is taken. And the day begins again. There is no sense of surprise. No feeling that something new has started. Only the understanding that what ended has simply continued. The body moves slowly. Naturally. Clothing is adjusted without thought. Each motion is familiar, practiced through repetition. There is no hesitation in any of it. Everything follows a pattern already known. The floor creaks softly underfoot. A sound so familiar it no longer draws attention. It belongs to the house as much as anything else. The child steps into the main room. Everything is exactly as it was left. The table in its place. The chair resting nearby. The quiet order of the space unchanged by the night. There is comfort in the sameness. Not excitement. Not joy in a loud sense. But a calm, steady recognition that nothing has shifted. That nothing needs to be adjusted. That the world has remained exactly as expected. The first small task begins. A cloth is lifted. A surface is wiped. The movement is gentle and unbroken, flowing from one action to the next without pause. There is no need to think about it. No need to decide. The rhythm already exists. It simply continues. Outside, the morning begins to awaken as well. The same distant sounds return. A slow cart passing. Soft footsteps on stone. A door opening somewhere nearby, then closing again. The street is never truly silent in the morning, but it is never loud either. It exists in a middle place. Soft. Measured. Predictable. And within that predictability, the child moves. Each task small. Each action quiet. Each moment part of a larger pattern that stretches endlessly forward. There is no urgency in the morning light. It does not demand attention. It simply grows. Slowly. Evenly. Spreading across surfaces, touching walls, resting in corners. The world feels contained within it. Defined. Unmoving in its structure. The child pauses briefly again. Standing still. The room around them remains calm. Nothing shifts. Nothing calls for change. And in that stillness, there is a quiet sense of understanding. Not spoken. Not taught. But known. That the day will follow the same path. That it will not deviate. That it will unfold exactly as all the days before it have done. And this certainty brings a gentle ease. A release from expectation. Because nothing new is required. Nothing unexpected will arrive. Only the continuation of what already is. The pause ends. The rhythm resumes. Another small task begins. Then another. Each one simple enough to complete without thought. Together, they form the structure of the morning. And the morning, in turn, becomes part of the larger cycle of life here. A cycle that does not bend or shift. That does not open into something unfamiliar. But remains steady. Quiet. Constant. Outside, the light grows a little stronger, though it never becomes harsh. It stays soft, filtered, contained within the narrow space of the street. The sky above remains pale, only partly visible between buildings. It does not feel wide or open. It feels close. As though the world itself is gently enclosed. And within that enclosure, the child continues. Moving from task to task. From moment to moment. Without resistance. Without questioning. In Victorian childhood, this repetition becomes the foundation of everything. Not something imposed loudly. But something absorbed quietly, over time. Through mornings like this one. Through afternoons that follow the same pattern. Through evenings that close in the same way. And because of this repetition, expectation begins to fade. Not disappear. But settle. Shrink. Become something small enough to carry without noticing. The morning continues to unfold. The same quiet rhythm. The same gentle structure. The same unchanging flow. And the child remains within it. Not searching. Not reaching. Only moving forward, through a world that stays calm, steady, and quietly the same. The morning continues in its familiar silence. It does not rush forward. It does not pause. It simply unfolds, as if it has always known exactly how to move from one moment to the next. The light grows a little fuller now, though it remains soft. It slips gently through the narrow spaces between buildings, resting on the worn surfaces inside the home, touching everything with a quiet, even presence. The child moves within this light. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just steadily, in the way that has become natural over time. There is no need to consider each action. No need to decide. The rhythm is already there, guiding everything. A small task is completed. Then another. Each one simple enough that it barely leaves a trace once finished. The hands move with care, though the care no longer requires thought. It has become part of the body, like memory that does not fade. The room remains unchanged. The table, the chair, the quiet corners of the house all hold their place as they always have. Nothing feels new. Nothing feels different. And in that sameness, there is a soft kind of steadiness. A quiet reassurance that nothing has been lost, nothing disrupted, nothing made uncertain. Outside, the street continues its slow, measured rhythm. The same patterns return. Footsteps passing in the distance. A cart moving slowly along the stone road. A brief voice carried through the air, then gone again almost immediately. These sounds are not interruptions. They are part of the environment itself. Like wind that never fully stops, or light that never fully disappears. The child hears them without turning. They belong to the background of the day. And so attention does not follow them. It remains close. Close to the present. Close to what is already here. The morning light shifts slightly again. It grows softer in some places, stronger in others, as if it is gently exploring the room. Everything it touches becomes a little more visible, but never sharp. Never bright in a way that demands attention. The world remains calm in its brightness. Contained. Quiet. The child pauses briefly. A small stillness. The room holds steady around them. Nothing changes. Nothing moves in a way that feels important. And in this stillness, there is no sense of waiting. Only presence. Only the quiet understanding that everything is already in motion as it should be. The pause ends naturally. There is no decision to continue. The continuation simply happens. Another task begins. Then another. Each one small, each one familiar, each one part of the same ongoing pattern that defines the day. There is a gentle comfort in this repetition. Not in the sense of excitement or satisfaction, but in the sense of knowing. Knowing what comes next. Knowing what is expected. Knowing that nothing will break the flow. In Victorian childhood, this sense of order becomes deeply rooted. It does not feel imposed in a single moment. It grows slowly, like something formed through countless small repetitions. Through mornings that always begin the same way. Through afternoons that always settle into the same rhythm. Through evenings that always close in quiet stillness. And so, expectation becomes something very small. Something almost invisible. The child steps slightly toward the window again. The outside world is still there, as it always is. The narrow street. The close buildings. The pale sky visible only in thin fragments above. It does not feel distant. It does not feel open. It feels close. Held within limits that are not questioned. Other children move through the street in the same quiet manner as before. Not gathered. Not loud. just passing through their own small paths, each one within their own space, each one shaped by the same gentle rhythm. There is a brief moment of shared presence, a passing glance, a small movement of acknowledgement. Then it is gone, and everything returns to its usual quiet flow. The child turns away from the window. There is no reason to remain there. Nothing changes beyond it. Nothing calls for attention. Inside again, the familiar stillness waits. The same table. The same chair. The same soft light moving slowly across surfaces. Everything remains as it should be. And so, the rhythm continues. Another small task. Another gentle motion. Each one flowing into the next without interruption. The morning deepens slightly. Time moves forward in its quiet way. There is no sound marking its passage. Only the gradual shift of light. Only the steady continuation of small actions. And within that continuation, the child remains. Not thinking of what might come later. Not imagining anything beyond what is present. Just moving through the day as it unfolds. Calm. Steady. Contained. The world outside and the world inside feel connected in their sameness. Both following the same quiet rhythm. Both shaped by the same gentle consistency. And in that consistency, there is no urgency. No need for change. Only the soft unfolding of time that does not ask to be noticed. The child completes another task. Then stands still for a moment again. The silence around them is deep, but not empty. It is full of the same quiet presence that has always been here. And in that presence, there is a simple understanding. That life continues in this way. That it does not need to expand. That it does not need to offer more. That what is already here is enough. The pause fades. The rhythm returns. And the morning carries on, steady, quiet, and unchanged, moving gently forward as it always has. The morning does not feel like it is moving forward quickly. It moves instead in small, almost invisible steps. One moment blending into the next, without clear edges between them. The light in the room shifts gently, as though it is breathing with the same slow rhythm as everything else. The child continues within this quiet flow. There is no break in the pattern. No interruption. Only the steady repetition of small actions that fill the space of time without drawing attention to themselves. A cloth is lifted. A surface is touched. A small adjustment is made, then left as it should be. Nothing lingers longer than necessary. Nothing demands reflection. Each moment completes itself quietly, then gives way to the next. The room remains simple. Unchanging. The same familiar arrangement of objects resting in their usual places. There is comfort in this stability, though it is not a comfort that calls for thought. It simply exists. Like the air. Like the soft light. Like the quiet rhythm of the day itself. Outside, the street continues its slow, steady presence. The sounds drift in and out without urgency. A cart passing at a distance. A faint exchange of voices that lasts only a moment. Footsteps that appear, then fade. Everything outside feels slightly removed, as if it belongs to another layer of the same quiet world. And yet, it is not separate. It is part of the same unfolding day. The child hears it, but does not follow it. There is no need to look outward for long. The attention remains close. Close to the present moment. Close to the small space that has already been defined. The morning light shifts again. It grows a little warmer, though never bright enough to feel sharp or overwhelming. It settles gently across the floor, across the table, across the quiet corners of the room. Everything it touches becomes softly defined, but not changed. Nothing feels altered, only revealed in a calmer tone. The child pauses. A brief stillness. The body remains quiet. The room remains quiet. Even the air feels still in this moment. There is no anticipation within it. No sense that something is about to happen. Only the presence of what already is. And then, as always, the stillness ends without effort. There is no decision to move forward. The movement simply returns. Another task. Then another. Each one forming part of the same steady pattern that holds the entire morning together. In Victorian childhood, this pattern becomes the foundation of understanding. Not through instruction. Not through explanation. But through repetition that never breaks. Through days that resemble one another so closely that they begin to feel like variations of a single, continuous moment. And over time, something settles within that repetition. A quiet acceptance. That life is not meant to change suddenly. That it is not meant to expand in unpredictable ways. That it remains within a gentle structure that does not shift. And within that structure, expectation becomes very small. Not removed, but softened. Reduced to something that no longer presses forward. The child moves again near the window. The outside world remains the same. The narrow street. The close buildings. The pale sky above, only partially visible through the gaps between structures. It does not feel wide. It does not feel open. It feels close. Contained. Familiar in its limits. Other children pass through the street again. Their movements are quiet. Measured. Each one following their own small path, shaped by the same underlying rhythm. There is no gathering. No interruption. Only passing presence. And then, separation again. The child turns away from the window. There is nothing new to see. Nothing unexpected waiting outside. Only the continuation of the same quiet world. Inside, the room remains steady. The table remains where it is. The chair remains still. The light continues its slow movement across surfaces, changing nothing, only shifting gently as time passes. The child returns to movement. A small task is completed. Then another. Each one simple enough to require no thought beyond the moment itself. Together, they form the structure of the morning. A structure that does not vary. That does not bend. That does not open into something unknown. And within that structure, the child moves without resistance. Without hesitation. There is a kind of ease in this. Not excitement. Not emotion that rises and falls. But something quieter. A steady alignment with the rhythm of the day. As the morning continues, time passes without marking itself clearly. There is no moment that stands apart. Only a smooth flow from one small action to the next. The child remains within that flow. Present. Quiet. Unmoving in expectation. Because nothing requires more than what is already given. Nothing suggests anything beyond it. And so, the world continues in its calm repetition. The same light. The same sounds. The same gentle rhythm that does not ask to be noticed. And the child moves with it, softly, steadily, and without change. The morning has now settled into its fullest shape. It no longer feels like it is beginning, yet it has not reached its end. It simply exists in a long, steady middle, where time seems to move without effort, without urgency, without any need to announce itself. The light is more present now. Still soft. Still gentle. But more fully spread across the room, resting on every familiar surface as though it has always belonged there. The child continues within this light. There is no shift in attention. No change in rhythm. Only the ongoing movement of small tasks that form the structure of the day. A cloth is lifted again. Folded. Placed aside. A surface is adjusted with quiet care. Everything returns to order, even when it was never truly out of place. This is how the day is shaped. Not by change, but by maintenance. By gentle repetition that keeps everything in its known position. Outside, the street carries on in its usual way. The sounds are present, but never close. A cart passes at a steady pace. Footsteps come and go in brief intervals. A distant voice rises for a moment, then dissolves back into silence. The world beyond the house remains active, but not intrusive. It does not reach inward strongly. It simply exists alongside the stillness inside. And the child, as always, remains closer to the inside. Not in effort, but in habit. The morning light shifts again, though very slightly. It changes without drawing attention to itself. There are no sharp contrasts here. Only soft transitions. One tone becoming another without clear separation. The room feels calm within this movement. Everything is gently revealed, then gently softened again. The child pauses for a brief moment. Standing still. There is no thought of waiting. No expectation of something next. Only the quiet awareness of being present in a space that does not demand anything beyond what it already holds. The pause is brief. Almost imperceptible. And then it ends, as all pauses do, without needing to be decided. The rhythm continues. Another small action follows. Then another. Each one simple. Each one familiar. Each one part of a few figures pass again along the street. Their movements are unhurried. Careful. Each one following a path that seems already known to them. There is no interruption between them and the space they move through. Only quiet coexistence. And then, they are gone. The street returns to stillness. The child steps away from the window. There is no need to remain there. Nothing different will appear. Nothing unexpected will arrive. Inside, the room continues its calm presence. The same table. The same chair. The same soft arrangement of light and shadow shifting slowly across the floor. The child returns to small movement. A task completed. Then another. Each one blending seamlessly into the next, forming a continuous thread that holds the morning together. There is no moment that feels separate from the rest. No interruption that breaks the flow. Only continuity. The light grows slightly warmer as time moves forward, though even this warmth remains gentle. It does not press. It does not demand attention. It simply exists as part of the same steady atmosphere. The air remains still. The sounds outside remain distant. The world feels both present and far away at the same time, as if held at a quiet distance that never changes. And within this unchanged distance, the child continues. Not moving toward anything. Not moving away from anything. Only moving through what is already here. Step by step. Moment by moment. Task by task. The rhythm remains unbroken. And in that unbroken rhythm, there is a quiet kind of peace. Not something that arrives suddenly, but something that has always been present, beneath everything else. The morning continues to stretch forward, softly and evenly, carrying the child along its calm, familiar path, where nothing needs to change, and nothing ever truly does. The morning begins to feel slightly longer now, though nothing about it actually changes. Time does not hurry. It does not slow. It simply continues, steady and even, like a soft current that carries everything forward without resistance. The light in the room has grown a little fuller, resting across the worn surfaces with a calm, unchanging glow. It does not feel new. It does not feel old. It simply is. The child remains within this quiet flow. There is no break in attention, no shift in awareness. Only the steady continuation of small actions that shape the hours. A cloth is folded again. A surface is gently brushed. A small object is adjusted and left where it belongs. Each movement is familiar enough that it requires no thought. It happens almost on its own, as if the body has learned the shape of the day and no longer needs guidance. The room stays the same. The table, the chair, the quiet arrangement of simple objects, all remain in their usual places, unchanged by time or movement. There is a calmness in the sameness. A kind of soft certainty that does not ask to be noticed. Outside, the street continues its distant rhythm. The sounds arrive in small fragments. A cart rolling slowly over stone. Footsteps that pass and fade. A brief voice that rises and disappears almost at once. None of it lingers. None of it interrupts. It simply forms part of the background, like a quiet layer beneath everything else. The child hears it, but does not turn toward it. There is no need. The outside world and the inside world move in parallel, but not in competition. Each has its place. Each continues in its own steady way. The morning light shifts again, but only slightly. It moves gently across the room, softening some edges while gently revealing others. Nothing feels sharp. Nothing feels sudden. Everything is smooth in its transition. The child pauses once more. Standing still. The silence around them deepens for a brief moment. Not empty. Just still. There is no anticipation within it. No sense that something is about to happen. Only the quiet presence of what already exists. And then, without interruption, the movement resumes. The pause dissolves naturally, as all pauses do. Another task begins. Then another. Each one small enough to feel almost weightless. Together, they form the structure of the morning without drawing attention to themselves. In Victorian childhood, this kind of structure becomes deeply embedded. It does not feel imposed in a single moment. It forms gradually, through repetition so consistent that it becomes invisible. Days that mirror one another. Routines that never shift. Expectations that remain small enough to be carried without thought. And so, over time, something settles into place. Not a belief. Not an idea. But a quiet understanding that life does not need to expand beyond its current shape. That what is present is already enough. The child moves closer to the window again. Outside, the world remains in its familiar arrangement. The narrow street. The closed buildings standing quietly on either side. The sky, pale and partially hidden, offering only fragments of openness. There is no sense of distance here. Everything feels near. Contained. Held within gentle boundaries that do not change. A few figures pass once more along the street. Their movements are unhurried. Measured. They follow their paths as if those paths have always been there waiting for them. And then, as before, they pass out of view. the street returns to its quiet state. The child turns away. There is nothing new to observe. Nothing that would alter the day. Inside, the room continues its steady presence. The same arrangement. The same soft light. The same stillness that does not shift even as time moves forward. The child returns to small work. A task is completed. Then another. Each one simple. Each one familiar. Each one flowing naturally into the next. There is no interruption in the rhythm. No break in the pattern. Only continuity. The morning continues to unfold gently, without urgency. Time passes, but it does not feel like it is leaving anything behind. It simply moves forward, carrying everything with it in the same steady way. The child remains within that movement. Not resisting it. Not anticipating anything beyond it. Just existing within the calm repetition of the day. There is a quiet ease in this. Not excitement. Not emotion that rises and falls. But something steadier. A sense that nothing is missing. That nothing is required beyond what is already present. The light softens again slightly as the morning continues. The air remains still. The sounds outside remain distant. And the world, both inside and beyond the house, keeps its gentle rhythm without change. The child moves once more through the familiar pattern of tasks, each one blending into the next, forming a quiet thread that holds the entire morning together. And within that thread, there is only continuity. Only calm. Only the steady unfolding of a life that does not need to be different from what it already is. The morning has now settled into something steady and familiar, where even time itself feels less like movement and more like repetition. Nothing in the room changes in any noticeable way. The light continues its slow, patient presence across the floor and walls, never too bright, never too dim, always holding the same gentle tone that makes everything feel quiet and contained. The child continues moving within the stillness. There is no hesitation in the body, no pause in thought that needs to be resolved. Everything has already been learned through repetition, through days that have followed the same pattern again and again until the pattern feels like the only natural way for life to exist. A small task is completed. Then another. Each one simple enough to require no effort beyond attention, and even that attention feels soft now, almost automatic. The hands move with quiet certainty. The movements are careful, not because they must be, but because they have always been that way. The room remains unchanged. The same furniture. The same still arrangement of ordinary objects. Nothing is out of place, and nothing calls for correction beyond the gentle, repeated maintenance that shapes the day. Outside, the street continues its distant rhythm, but even that feels less distinct now. The sounds arrive as they always do. A cart rolling slowly. Footsteps passing without hurry. A brief voice that fades before it fully forms into meaning. They do not interrupt the morning. They simply exist alongside it, like something that belongs to another layer of the same quiet world. The child hears them without turning. Without reacting. There is no need to follow them, because they lead nowhere different from yesterday, or the day before that. Everything outside feels familiar in its consistency. Predictable. Held within the same quiet boundaries. The light shifts again, almost imperceptibly. It slides across the room in a slow, even motion, as though it has nowhere else to be except where it already is. The child pauses briefly. A moment of stillness that does not feel like stopping, but like a natural part of movement itself. There is no thought attached to it. No sense of waiting. Only presence. Then, as always, the pause dissolves on its own. Another task begins. Then another. The rhythm continues without interruption, forming the structure of the morning in a way that feels both simple and complete. In Victorian childhood, this kind of structure is not questioned. It is not examined. It is simply lived, quietly and repeatedly, until it becomes indistinguishable from the idea of time itself. Days do not stand apart from one another. They blend gently into a single continuous experience, shaped by the same expectations, the same small responsibilities, the same gentle limits that never need to be spoken aloud. And because of this repetition, expectation becomes something very small. Not absent. Just quiet enough that it no longer reaches outward. The child moves closer to the window once again. The outside world is still there, unchanged in its familiar form. The narrow street. The close buildings that seem to lean slightly inward. The pale sky above, visible only in thin, fragmented sections between structures. It does not feel open or expansive. It feels contained, as though the world itself prefers to remain within gentle limits. A few figures pass again along the street. Their movements are steady, unhurried, as if they already know exactly where they are going and have no need to consider anything beyond that. They pass through the view and disappear just as quietly as they arrived. The street returns to its usual stillness. The child does not remain at the window. There is nothing new to observe. Nothing that would alter the rhythm of the day. Inside, the room continues its calm presence. The same table. The same chair. The same soft, filtered light that never demands attention but is always present. The child returns to movement. A task is completed. Then another. Each one small. Each one familiar. Each one part of a sequence that has no beginning that can be separated from its end. The morning continues to unfold without interruption. Time moves forward, but it does not feel like change. It feels like continuation. A soft extension of what has always been. The air remains still. The sounds outside remain distant. The world maintains its quiet balance, neither expanding nor contracting, simply existing in a steady, unbroken form. And within that form, the child continues. Not reaching. Not resisting. Only following the gentle rhythm that has shaped every day before this one. There is a quiet certainty in this repetition. A sense that nothing is missing. That nothing is waiting to be added. That what is already here is complete in its simplicity. The morning light softens slightly again as time passes. The room remains calm. The pattern remains unchanged. And the child moves through it, step by step, moment by moment, within a world that stays gentle, familiar, and quietly the same. The morning does not announce its turning point. There is no clear edge where one moment becomes another. Instead, it continues in the same soft, even way, as though time prefers not to be noticed at all. The light in the room has grown slightly fuller again, but it remains gentle. It rests quietly on familiar surfaces, never harsh, never bright enough to demand attention. Everything feels softly held within it, as if the world is being kept in a calm, careful balance. The child remains within this balance. There is no shift in posture, no change in rhythm. Only the steady continuation of small, familiar actions. A surface is straightened. A cloth is folded and placed aside. A small object is returned to its place, even though it was never truly out of place. These movements are not separate from one another. They flow together, forming a quiet sequence that feels less like effort and more like habit. The room itself does not change. The same furniture. The same still arrangement. The same quiet presence of everyday objects that have no need to be noticed in order to belong. Outside, the street continues in its usual distance. The sounds arrive in soft fragments. A cart passing at an unhurried pace. Footsteps that appear and fade without drawing attention. A voice that carries briefly through the air, then dissolves into silence. None of it interrupts the stillness inside the house. It simply exists alongside it, as it always has. The child hears it, but does not turn toward it. There is no reason to follow what does not change. The outside world is familiar in its repetition. Predictable. Steady. And so, attention remains within the room. Within the small, known space where everything has its place. The light shifts again, though only slightly. It moves across the floor in a slow, almost imperceptible change, softening one corner of the room while gently brightening another. There is no sense of contrast in this movement. Only continuation. The child pauses. A brief stillness. There is no thought attached to it, no expectation forming within it. It is simply part of the rhythm, like a breath that is neither held nor released. Then it passes. The movement resumes without effort. Another task begins. Then another. Each one small enough to feel almost weightless. Together, they form the structure of the morning, not as something built deliberately, but as something that emerges naturally from repetition. In Victorian childhood, this structure becomes the quiet framework of daily life. It is not explained. It is not questioned. It is simply lived until it becomes indistinguishable from the passing of time itself. And within that repetition, expectation becomes something very small. Not removed, but softened to the point where it no longer reaches outward. The child moves near the window again. Outside, the street remains as it has always been. Narrow. Contained. Familiar in its stillness. The buildings stand close together, shaping the space between them into something quiet and enclosed. The sky above is pale, visible only in narrow fragments that feel distant but not unreachable. It does not suggest openness. It suggests continuity. A few figures pass along the street once more. Their movements are unhurried, steady, and without interruption. They do not seem to begin or end anywhere new. They simply move through the space as though it is already known to them. And then they are gone again. The street returns to its quiet state. The child steps away from the window. There is nothing new waiting there. Nothing that would alter the shape of the day. Inside, the room continues its steady presence. The same table. The same chair. The same soft light resting across surfaces without change. The child returns to movement. A task is completed. Then another. Each one simple. Each one familiar. Each one blending into the next without separation. The morning continues to unfold in its quiet, steady way. Time moves forward, but without urgency. Without emphasis. Without drawing attention to itself. It feels less like passing and more like staying, stretched gently across the same familiar space. The air remains still. The sounds outside remain distant. And the world, both inside and beyond the house, continues in its calm, unbroken rhythm. The child moves through it without resistance. Without anticipation. Only presence. Only continuation. There is a quiet ease in this repetition. Not excitement. Not change. But a steady familiarity that does not need to be questioned in order to be understood. The morning light softens once more as time moves forward. The room remains unchanged. The rhythm remains intact. And the child continues within it, gently carried along by a world that stays quiet, familiar, and endlessly the same. The day begins to feel like it is no longer moving forward in any noticeable way. Not because it has stopped, but because everything within it has become so steady, so familiar, that movement and stillness start to feel almost the same. The light in the room is softer now. Not fading quickly. Just slowly easing into a quieter tone, as though it is preparing, gently and without urgency, to let the day settle into its final shape. The child continues through the last small tasks. There is no sense that anything important is ending. Only that things are being placed back into order, as they always are. A surface is cleared. A simple object is set down. A final adjustment is made to something that was already nearly perfect in its quiet arrangement. Each action is small. Each one familiar. Each one completing something that never felt incomplete. The room remains unchanged in its character. The same quiet furniture. The same worn surfaces that have held countless ordinary moments. The same soft presence of a life that asks for very little and becomes accustomed to even less. Outside, the street grows quieter in its own slow way. The passing sounds are fewer now. More distant. A final cart moves through the space beyond the window, its sound fading gently as it goes. Footsteps appear, then disappear, as if the street itself is slowly letting go of the day. Everything feels like it is drawing inward. Not ending sharply. Just easing into stillness. The child stands for a moment in the room. There is no thought of what comes next. No anticipation of something different. Only the quiet recognition that the day has passed through its familiar shape and reached this point, just as it always has. The pause is brief. Not meaningful in a loud sense. Just present. And then it passes, as all moments do. The movement toward rest begins. Not as a decision, but as continuation. The same rhythm that guided the morning and afternoon now gently leads into evening. The small space of the home grows dimmer. Shadows soften and spread, not sharply, but like a quiet covering that does not disturb anything beneath it. The child prepares for sleep in the same simple way as before. There is nothing to arrange beyond what is already known. Nothing to adjust beyond what is already in place. Everything is familiar. Everything is sufficient. The bed is there. The room is still. The air is calm. There is no expectation beyond this moment. No reaching forward. No looking back. Only the present, quiet, and complete in its simplicity. The child lies down. The body settles easily into rest, as if it remembers this pattern without needing instruction. The world outside is nearly silent now. Even the smallest sounds have softened into distance. The house feels still in a deeper way, as though it has fully entered its nightly pause. There is no thought that needs to continue. No feeling that needs to be resolved. Only a slow, gentle fading into sleep. And in that fading, there remains the same quiet understanding that has been present throughout every part of the day. That life moves in soft repetition. That each day follows the same gentle path. That expectations remain small, quiet, and contained. And that within this simple rhythm, nothing is missing. Nothing is required beyond what already is. The night settles fully now. The room becomes still. And everything rests. Quiet. Unchanged. And gently at peace.